Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm your host, Anna Gray. The best thing about being a nurse and entrepreneur over the last 25 years are the relationships I've developed and the people I've met. As a legal nurse consultant, I wanted you to hear from those amazing people in the legal and healthcare communities. I wanted you to hear who they are and to celebrate them with me. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. Let's dive into the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. Welcome to the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I'm really excited to have my guest, Marcia, here because we've been trying to get on this call for a little while. And so here we are. So I'm so interested in hearing Marsha's story. So Marcia, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It's kind of exciting.
Yay. Okay. So where in the world are you coming from?
I am coming from Cincinnati, Ohio. I actually live in a suburb of Cincinnati called Loveland.
Okay.
Which there is a Loveland, Colorado, but I am Loveland, Ohio.
Loveland, Ohio. All right. And I always picture where my guest is from or where they are at. And then I always try and think, have I been there? Have I not? So I've been to Ohio once. I went to a really amazing conference actually in Columbus. But what I know of Cincinnati is that my mom was a sales rep for like 25 years for Procter & Gamble.
Yep.
That is in Cincinnati. So
very big here.
Yeah. It's very big there. And she made lots of trips there. And that is my fun fact about Cincinnati for myself. So not that anybody cares, but it's just kind of fun for me to just kind of think about. I like to say that I've traveled a lot, but I really haven't. So it's fun. It's fun for me to see where people are at.
Well, you can come back anytime.
Okay.
For you.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. Good deal. Okay, so have you always been in Loveland?
No. I was born and raised in Southern Illinois, actually right across the Mississippi from St. Louis, a small town called Belleville. And then when I went away to college, I went to school in San Antonio, Texas. And we lived there for 20 years.
Oh,
and then moved here to Loveland, and we've been here for 25 years.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy how time just, you think, oh, this is new for me. And then you realize how long you've actually been there. I know, I can relate to that.
Exactly.
Okay. So you went to school in San Antonio. What brought you there? Was it nursing
Well,
school?
It's kind of a funny story. Yeah.
I want to hear.
And you always seem to ask your guests, like, how did you decide you wanted to be a nurse?
Yes.
So it has to start with that.
Okay.
Because it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, it's really kind of weird because I'm a very organized person. So you would think that I would have had it together, but I didn't have it together until I guess I went to college, because in high school I didn't. My whole goal in life in high school was to hang out with my friends, and I was a cheerleader, so I didn't care about anything else.
Okay.
And but I was in high school, and I don't remember if it was, I guess it was junior year, and I was in this current events class or something, and they walked in and they said, everybody's meeting with the high school counselor today, and you're going to talk about what you want to do when you graduate and where you want to go. Well, I kind of sort of knew I wanted to do something medical because my favorite class was anatomy. And sorry to all the cat lovers out there, but our anatomy class was dissecting cats.
Yep.
And just the people in that class that are like I'm still friends with, we just had a blast. And so I just really enjoyed that. So I knew that's what I would do. But that was honestly the extent of it, right? Mm-hmm. And so so they walk in and they tell us that we have to have, this information. And they were going to go down the row as to whose turn it was to go talk to the high school counselor, who happened to be my mom's cousin. So I was like, oh, I don't know. And I hated being caught off guard. Well, in front of me was this girl named Angie. I won't say her last name because she could be listening. But anyway, she was like the straight A student, you know, always prim and proper or whatever. And she turns around in her chair and she goes, so what are you going to be? And I was too embarrassed to say, I don't know. I haven't even thought about it, you know.
Yep.
So I go, well, what are you going to be? And she said, I'm going to be a nurse. And I go, I'm going to be a nurse too. That is really what happened. So then it was my turn. So now I'm going to see my mom's cousin, and I'm afraid that, you know, he's going to report into her that I don't have my act together. So he says, well, what do you want to do? And I said, oh, I want to be a nurse. And he said, okay, well, what schools have you looked at? None, right? And I said, well, I don't know. And I said, I guess in St. Louis. And he said, I said, but I'd really like to go somewhere far where there's a beach, right? And so he goes, oh, I know exactly where you should go. And I was in a Catholic high school. And I went to Catholic grade school. And he said, there's a school in San Antonio, Texas called Incarnate Word College. And it's a Catholic college. It's ranked 5th in the nation for their nursing program. It's 2 hours from the beach, and it's really far from here. Does that sound like something you would like? And I was like, yes.
Oh my
yes,
God.
I would. But I just thought there's no way my parents would let me go. And I probably mentioned that. And he said, well, I'll talk to your mom, and, you know, your grades are good. We can get you a scholarship and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I came out of that meeting, and I walked up to my really good friend and who was like, I was in the B's and she was in the S's. Yeah. And so she said, what'd you tell him? And so I told her my whole story, and she goes, I'm going to tell him the same thing. And I go, okay. She and I are still like very close friends, and we both went to school together in San Antonio.
Oh my gosh. That is brilliant.
Isn't that wild?
I love that story.
And the other funny thing is that in high school, I had a friend who worked for a pediatrician's office. I think she just did filing or something. And we were out one time, and she was telling us about a kid who had come in, and he was kicking and screaming, and he kicked her in the face.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, okay, well, that's never what I will never do kids.
Yeah.
Like, I just will never do kids. Well, here I am.
And here you
4
are.
years
I know.
pediatrics.
Yeah. It's so funny. I love that you share that story. I the first thing I thought of, it's a similar story, but it's not a similar story. I'm gonna call out my ex-husband, and that's okay because he doesn't listen to this, and it's not horrible, but it's funny. So my bachelor's degree is in exercise physiology, and he didn't go to college, and he was kind of in the same situation where he was meeting someone new, and he didn't want to be embarrassed by the fact that he didn't go to college, and it was just in conversation. And so they asked him, oh, where'd you go to college? And he said, the college that I went to. And then they said, oh, really? What's your degree in? Exercise physiology. And he just played it off like he went, and he was just hoping that nobody would ask him questions. And so to this day, we joke about the fact that he and I have the same degree because he couldn't think of anything else. So that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. But the fact that you carried on and that's where you ended up is even better. I think that's I love that story.
And I kind of, when I went home and talked to my parents, you know, I remember having the conversation with my dad, like, or I might go to medical school. And he like shut that down. He was like, no, you don't want to do that. And I go, okay, why not? And he said, it's a lot of money and it's a lot of investment. And if you are a nurse, you can stop working, you can raise your family, and then you can start working again. And I was like, oh, and honestly, like I am so thankful for that, because I did get to go on and be a nurse practitioner, which kind of brought in some of those goals, you know, but so that all worked out really nice. But pretty funny.
That's I love the fact that he shut that down. Because most parents would not. They'd be like, oh wow, all right. And again, I'm going to call out my ex-husband, because my daughter originally was the same thing. It was like, okay, medical school. And he was adamant about it. You should go, you should go, you should go. And me as the nurse, like, she doesn't need to go. You know, she doesn't want to spend all that time and money. And might as well just go to nursing school, get that done, and then go to CRNA school because she wanted to be an anesthesiologist originally. It's like, it's a way better route. And you never know. You get into it and you have an option to do something else in case you don't want to go down that route because you're so young. But man, he fought me on that. And so that's why I appreciate that they had said that, because it really is a great route to take. I mean, nothing against the MDs we work with, but that's a tough route. It's a lot. It's just a lot. I guess I think, and you could tell me if you agree with this, but when you're young and you have this big aspiration to be a doctor and it's like in your blood, and those are the ones that should go that route.
Yes. And I always think that I wanted to do it, it's like, dress to impress. Like I think at the time I wanted to be a doctor because it sounded good. Right.
Yes.
But, and I have frequently worked with a lot of residents who would sit in our nurse practitioner office with all of us and say, I am so mad that nobody told me that I could do that route. You know, they're all like, and while they're trying to, handle their kids in daycare and be a doctor. And it was before they had changed all the rules that are in place now. And, they were all working 12, 14, 16 hours a day. And they were actually quite envious of our roles. So.
Yeah. I've had those same conversations. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. They were like, we were duped. Nobody told us this. Mostly for us, it's anesthesia. I mean, those guys have the worst schedule on the planet for having a family, and at least in every hospital I've ever worked in. We don't really work with CRNAs. So the anesthesiologists have just the worst schedule, and these young ones come out and they go, nobody told us this, unless they had a family member. Most of them feel duped, and they don't necessarily last in the big trauma centers. They were like, this is not what I signed up for. And it's sad because they've spent all of this time and money in their journey, and they were like, wait a minute. So it is a great route, and we know the secret.
Yeah. And I came from a very middle class family. So the fact that my parents let me go far away to school was probably because, I had gotten a scholarship, but it was cheaper than going to St. Louis because it was out of state tuition. So, but in retrospect, they spent a lot of their money to get me down there, to pay for my school and all that kind of stuff. And I did work study or whatever, but I once called him, my dad, it was always on, just tell you how old I am. It was always on Sunday, and you called collect. Yeah. And you'd ask for somebody who does is Jane there? And they'd go, no, there's no Jane here. And they'd hang up, and then they'd call you back. So it was the whole thing, right?
I remember those days. I remember those tricks. Yeah.
And I called him, and so I had taken an elective in tailoring because I love to sew and crafting and all this stuff. So I called him and I said, hey, Dad, guess what? He goes, what? And I go, I'm going to change my major. And he goes, oh, really? And I said, and it was a fine art school. And I said, yeah. And he goes, what are you changing it to? And I said, I'm going to go into interior design. And he said, I think that is a great idea. You can do it just as soon as you finish your nursing degree.
That's awesome. Shut that one down.
Yeah, shut that one down too. So, yeah.
He was keeping you in the lanes. I would say that. Yeah. It's sometimes one kid is easier to keep in the lanes than the other. The other, I said this the other day, the other is I picture a bowling alley with bumpers.
Yep.
And it's bink, 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 bink. Just keeping her down the lane, as a parent, hitting those bumpers back and forth. Yeah. So clearly he kept you in the lanes. You moved forward. You went to nursing school, which I think was also pretty rare, though, back then, to go straight into nursing school. From my experience, it was something that you had done a little bit further down the line. It was hard to get in right away into a program. At least out on the West Coast, it wasn't really a thing. So that's amazing that you went right into it. So when you went to nursing school, was it kind of the same thing? You're like, okay, now I'm here. What? I like anatomy. What am I going to do? Or did you? And I know you said that you didn't want to work with kids. How was that for you going through nursing school? Like, kind of picking the specialty or deciding on that, because we all have different stories when it comes to that.
Yeah. So I like all like technology stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I had decided that I wanted to do OR. And I went and I was talking to my instructor one day, and she said, so what area do you think you want to be in? And we probably had done clinicals maybe, I don't know, 1 or 2 semesters. And I said, I think I want to work in the OR. And she goes, really? Why is that? And I go, I don't know. I just like all the, it's like I liked anatomy, right? I like all that technology kind of stuff. And she goes, and I remember her like really hurting my feelings to this day. And she goes, you would not be good there. And I'm like, wow. Oh, really? And she goes, yeah. And I go, why is that? And she goes, you talk way too much.
That's surprising, because I think us OR nurses talk a lot.
I know. And she said, you have a talent that of talking and communicating, and I think that would not do you well in the OR. And I was like, oh, okay. And then clinicals went on, and I got to do an elective. I was in pediatric rotation. And at that point, I think I had softened some about the whole kid thing. But I got to do an elective in PICU. And I was sold. I was sold. I loved it. I loved everything about intubated children. And the more complicated they were, the more fascinated I was. Okay. So that was my very first job.
Yeah, I was going to say that therein lies the technical part. The more complicated, you're putting together the puzzle. So you're still using that analytical brain, and so that totally makes sense. Yeah. And you can talk because they're little. Okay, so you decided that you were like, I'm sold. This is for me. Now, when you finished school, did you go right into it, or what was that like? Oh, you did.
Yeah, I was hired. Back then you were almost hired before you graduated. So,
yeah, totally. Yeah,
I had a NICU and a PICU offer.
Wow.
And I remember thinking that PICU would give me more variety.
Yeah, right.
Now NICU. Well, see, back then, if you were a 30-weeker, that was like a big deal, right? So it was a little different, the variety of NICU of babies. Now it's all kinds of stuff, but but back then it was probably way more feeders and growers than anything. And peds, it was just all span of ages, right? Sure. And I really liked that teenage year. I still do, the teens. So I picked.
Interesting. I don't hear. I think your story is different, because I don't hear that. I don't think I haven't heard that. I mean, I remember going to nursing school and doing that rotation, and it was kind of a blip. And now going down the road so many years later, you look back and I don't think I've ever met a nurse that actually said that they really like the teenage years, which I love. I think that's amazing, because there's absolutely a space for that, and I am glad to know you, because it's just, this is what I love about this podcast. And we kind of alluded to this before we went live, is that everybody has a different story. And even though we're all nurses, for the most part, I mean, I've interviewed other people. We all have a different story. We all have a different lead up to our story, and then actually working. The reason why we chose a specialty, or the reason why we left specialties, or whatever. They're all different, and I just love understanding what makes people tick. You know, it's like you get up in the morning because you love showing up for, you know, whatever it is for you. And so I love the fact that you say that. Maybe because I'm surrounded by teenagers these days. And it's an interesting age, especially when they're not mine, and then they're not yours. And boy, teenage years are interesting. So I commend you actually being in that world, especially on the medicine side. So you were offered 2 jobs, and I guess that's why you ended up down in San Antonio for so long, because you took it and you ended up working right away. I know, and those are the days too. And it's really kind of sad that nowadays it's a totally different story on how nurses start, because I, like you, already had a job before I finished school. I mean, maybe because I was working in the OR already. They had a spot for me when I was done. And nowadays it's not the case. Even those that are working in the operating room, I know from my own experience of those working in the operating room, go to nursing school, they're not necessarily guaranteed that position when they come back. And it's just so sad that you have to apply to these new grad programs, and they're hard to get into. And, you know, people move places to get into these new grad programs, which I find fascinating as well. So I kind of like the good old days.
I know. And I had looked at Dallas and Houston, and interviewed both of those cities as well, because I had like family in Dallas and friends in Houston. But right before I graduated, I met my husband, which obviously didn't know he was going to be my husband.
Right.
But, and it kind of just pushed the envelope a little bit to stay in San Antonio. So that's why I ended up picking that.
Yeah. And that's usually what happens, because I can relate to that too. Okay, so you started off, you were working in the PICU, right? And was it everything that you thought it would be? I mean, clearly you're still your specialty.
Yeah, you know, my very first patient, like I still remember his name. He was intubated. He was actually a teenager, and unfortunately, he had overdosed. And it was my very first day, and I was sitting with my shadow nurse, and he was on Pavulon. Remember Pavulon? To paralyze him, and sedation, obviously. So he was intubated, and he also had a tube down for charcoal. And so they were pumping charcoal in, and he's on this ventilator, and it was like, you know, really like, I didn't know what I was doing, obviously. Right. You know, I'd only done clinicals there or whatever.
Right.
And she says, I'm going to step out and go have lunch. He should be fine. And I said to her, I never forget it. I said, what am I supposed to do if he's not fine?
Right.
She had been teaching me about the meds and like what Pavulon does, and, you know, that kind of thing. And, but that it wears off, you know, and the lifespan's not very long. So you have to give them, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And she said, well, just call somebody, you know, you can call one of the other nurses. And I said, okay. And the PICU at the time was, you know, a lot of beds with curtains, you know, it wasn't like individual rooms.
Yep.
And so I remember sitting there, and all of a sudden he starts coughing. And I'm like, okay, is he moving? And I was just freaking out. And then he's coughing more, and his arms were restrained. And all of a sudden he lurches up in the bed, and charcoal is coming out.
Oh my gosh.
He's intubated. It's coming out of his mouth. And the whole thing's going on. And I'm freaking out. And all these nurses come running over, and everybody starts talking about, you know, trying to make sure he doesn't aspirate, right? And when she came back, I was like, he was not fine, and you left me, and all this kind of stuff. But then I needed her to really teach me about intubation and ventilation and what that whole thing was about, because that scared me to death.
Sure.
And ever since then, airway has been my thing. Like,
interesting.
I love airway, trach and vent. We had a kid early in my career that was trach. She was a birth injury, and she was always in and out of the hospital. And that's when I first learned what a trach was, and how a trach went in, and how to change a trach, and how a trach was to a ventilator, and the whole 9 yards. And so I stayed at that ICU. I think I was there about 5 or 6 years, and then I went to a hospital on the north side of town that was on the south side of town. I moved because all my friends had moved north, and then I worked at another PICU for about another 5 years. And then that's about the time I went back to school for a master's, not for an NP, but because back then NPs were very far and few between.
Yep.
San Antonio is a big military town, so there were quite a few NPs in the military, which was where I had gotten the motivation to be an NP, but there really wasn't an NP program. So I got a master's in education, nursing education or whatever, and as a clinical nurse specialist, you know.
Yep.
And so, and then I went in to started working private practice with one of the GI docs said, hey, will you come work for me? So he kind of stole me out of the PICU. I think at that time in my life, I was ready. I started having kids and
needed a change of scenery. So when you took that, was that a pediatric clinic?
Yeah.
So you were in private practice with your master's, working for a GI guy. How long did you do that?
It's for 2 years. And then the peds pulmonary female stole me from him, and I loved pulmonary. You know, GI wasn't my thing, but and she was having a really hard time. So at that time in San Antonio, there was one teaching hospital, but primarily pediatrics was private practice. And so, especially on the north side of town. So she was having a really hard time getting a partner, getting somebody to come move to San Antonio and be a partner for her. So she said to me, if you come work for me, she knew I wanted to be an NP. She said, you come work with me. I'll teach you everything you need to know and about anything. And I said, okay. And literally I worked for her for about 4 years. And I did NP work. I admitted kids. I discharged kids. I saw kids in her clinic. She would give me a script pad, and she would sign her name to like 30 scripts and just hand it to me and said, just fill these out. So I really got that pre-nurse practitioner, training from her, really.
Wow. That's so great. She took you under, because she was desperate, but she took you under your wing, and it's like priceless when someone does that. So then when you worked for her, did you end up going and getting your NP during that time or after that time or?
After. So then we moved to Ohio. And I had quit for a couple of years because I had my child. And I just couldn't work full time. And this is a funny thing. At the time, I thought I couldn't work full time and have my kid. And she needed me to work more than part time. And so I appreciated that. She appreciated that. So I ended up just quitting. And then my husband got transferred to Cincinnati. And so we moved to Cincinnati, and I had to get my license changed and find a job, And so I said, okay, well, at this point then years had passed. And I said, if I'm going to do all this, then I'm going to be an NP. And so University of Cincinnati had a postmaster's NP program in peds.
Perfect.
Oh, so I had gotten a job at Cincinnati Children's in pulmonary, part-time. Then I was in school. I had 2 kids, and my husband traveled all the time. and you wonder how like we do things.
Right. I know. I know. You do look back and you go, how did I survive this?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you did.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then you were locked into what you love, right? Is that basically what it comes down to?
So then I stayed at Cincinnati until 2 years ago I retired. So I was there 20 years, all in the same division of pulmonary.
Yeah. Wow. Did you ever get into
all three?
Yeah. Did you ever get into leadership, management? No. Just not for you.
No.
I get that. Okay.
No.
So you retired from that. You said 2 years ago? So you said?
Yes.
Okay. And did you retire just to go into legal nursing?
No.
Or
so
I
back in 2013, I was in pulmonary, and I got this email, and it was from an attorney, and it said he had this case about a kid who was in a long-term care facility, and he was working for the defense, and he wanted to know if I would help him review medical records and, I guess help with his defense. And I had never done, well, I'll take that back. I had done the Vicky Milazzo course.
Yep.
When I lived in Texas, and I had quit my job with that pulmonologist because I was kind of looking for something to do that I could stay at home with my kid. Mm-hmm. So I did the Vicky Milazzo course, but I never did anything with it. I got certified, but then we moved. And so then when I went to Cincinnati and got the job in pulmonary, it kind of just went by the wayside.
Okay.
So, but that had nothing to do with the fact that I get this email from this lawyer.
Sure.
And I was like, is someone trying to play a trick on me? Because it was before there was actually scam stuff. And I went to my physician mentor, and I said, who did a lot of legal work. And I said, is this really real? And he said, yeah, it's real. And he said, you should help him. And I said, I don't have a clue. And he goes, I'll help you. Just tell him you can help him. And I'm like, I mean, I didn't have anything. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have a fee schedule. Yeah. I didn't even know what to charge. And he said, just tell him you're going to help him, and I'll help you do all that. And he did. And so I found out that he had found me because he had Google searched ventilator program or something like that. And my name came up.
Wow.
And that's how he got my email to reach out. Well, I helped him with that whole case, and I loved it. I'm like, this is so awesome. So then about a year after that, so that was like 2014-ish, someone else had reached out to me, and I don't remember how they found me. And then I got another case from a friend of mine who was approached, and she was like, I don't want to do this. I gave him your name, and I go, okay. Well, then by 2017, I probably had done maybe 4 cases, and my accountant said, you probably need to have an LLC if you're going to like keep doing that.
Right.
So that's when in 2017, I started my LLC.
And then did you start marketing yourself, or did you just kind of let them come find you? What was that like?
Most of it was, they just found me, but LinkedIn, you know. Created a LinkedIn profile. I don't remember when that was, but I'm a member of AALNC. So I started going to the conferences, and, you hear a lot of this from the same people. I mean, the same people that you interview, we all kind of have that same thing, right? We join AALNC, we go to the conferences, we network. And then in 2019, I was at a LNC conference, and one of the vendors was a company called FIG. Faith in God is what it stands for, and it is an education. It's big now, but FIG is the education certification program for life care planners.
Right.
And I honestly will say I had no idea what that was. Right. I had always thought that if there was a lawsuit and someone needed to create a life care plan, dumb me, I thought they were by the insurance company.
Okay.
Because doesn't
Yeah,
insurance
that's fair.
control
That's a fair statement. Yeah.
So I walked by this booth and I said to the girl standing there, I said, what do you guys do? So she started explaining what a life care plan was and how that all happened. And I go, well, I do that on the daily. And she's like, what? And I said, so at that time, my last 15 years, I worked in a trach vent unit.
Right.
And in our unit, all the kids were primarily new trachs.
Okay.
On vents. Mm-hmm. And we sent those kids home. Mm-hmm. So I knew like everything they needed, all the way down to the suction catheter, right? Because I was part of a team of people that would discharge these multi-complex kids. And I go, I do that all the time. You're saying I can get paid to like write these up? And she's like, yeah, but it's a board certified program. So we offer the course. So I started that in 19 and finished during 2020.
Yeah. So do you do now? What does that look like for you? Do you do mostly life care planning? What is your business model look like now, 2025?
So 80% of the work I do is expert work.
Okay.
For med mal and personal injury. My favorite.
Yeah.
20% of my work is life care plans.
Yeah.
Because they take a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm a go person. And so it's not my favorite thing to do. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. But all the people that I have met at AANLCP, which is the Nurse Life Care Planner sister organization, I would guess you could call it, to AALNC, are just as great. Yeah. So I feel like I stay, and I even told my friend Sean, I said, I think I just stay in life care planning because of the people.
Sure. No,
I don't necessarily know that I want to write these plans, but yeah,
that makes sense. And I'll be honest with you, when I first got into legal nursing, it's almost like I equate it to new nurses that become nurses quickly, and then they jump in to get their NP in their first year. I had jumped into legal nursing and I was like, okay, I want to do everything. And I actually have the program, the FIG program for life care planning. I was like, I'm going to do life care planning. And I started it and I was like, okay, I need to back off and just like, when the time is right, we'll circle back on this one. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because we have a lot of listeners that are new at this or trying to decide on how. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing what I did because while I was sold on the program. For me, it was like, whoa, that's just probably too quick for me to jump into that. Based on my background, like if I had your background, I probably would have jumped into it and it would have been easier for me to get through. But I just I know I have it when and if the time is right, then I can sit down and spend the time and the energy and really focus on something like that and not just jump in and take it because it sounded like it was a great thing to do.
The one shout out I will say to that is so in peds, many of the cases are birth injury. Mm-hmm. And many of the birth injuries are pretty devastating. Mm-hmm. So that is why they take a long time.
Right.
But there are other things that life care planners do, such as Medicare set-asides and medical cost projections, right, and life care plans that are for adults who, there are some big amputations and spinal cord injuries. Those are big and long and heavy, but there are some quicker avenues. Right. But I feel like they tend to be adult oriented, and I'm not. Right. So my path is generally, life care plans for birth injuries that are pretty extensive, and right. You can know all the things and the physiology, but the methodology and the costing and coding,
Yeah.
That's like a whole different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, it is. And nowadays I do a lot, for one particular attorney client of mine. I do billing summaries, and it's just enough. And it's not a cost projection, but it's really like what he collects all of the bills and the code, the CPT codes. And I put that all together, and it's incredibly helpful for him. But it's very basic. It's just putting together, finding all of those numbers in the stack of records, and keeping them organized enough to make it make sense to them, so that they have a document that they didn't go do, and they have the records of how much did this cost. So it's very basic.
Yeah, but I love that. I mean, it's just like another great avenue, right?
Yeah, and it's so helpful, and it's not complicated. In fact, I started teaching one of my subcontractors to do it because it's not complicated at all. And we do, he does a lot of dental stuff, and not my favorite, but you're just putting a puzzle piece, a jigsaw puzzle together. Grab a little bit of this and grab a little bit of this, and just paint the story to make it make sense. And he's so grateful. And now all of his cases he sends me, I do a chronology, a med summary, and a billing summary. He's like, if there are any bills in there, just put a billing summary together for me, because it's incredibly helpful. Okay, no problem. So it's a valuable piece that I don't think that nobody really talks about. I just, thankfully, in the program that I had done, there was someone that was well versed in billing, and she was kind enough to share her template.
Yeah.
It's, an Excel spreadsheet. And, in her billing summaries, they became a little bit more complicated, but mine are very simple. So I took her template and I just took off a column that I didn't need, basically. So, it's very valuable to attorneys, for those of you listening, to offer something like that as well. I always say, and this is kind of a tangent too, but I had just texted that same subcontractor yesterday, and it was like a screenshot of a text to my attorney, and I said, I'm always selling, always be selling. And it was just selling a service that I had done for somebody else that I find would be valuable for you. And it was basically, in the merit review route. It was like, you keep taking these cases and they're farther along than you would like. And then you find out, because you hired an expert, that you have no case. It's like, just send me those surgical cases when you receive them, and I will do a very simple overview. And he was like, oh, wow. And I said, I'm always selling, and this is the same guy that I started doing billing summaries. And he's a solo attorney who's incredibly busy and overwhelmed. And he doesn't even have a paralegal, which I think is crazy. So I've become kind of his right-hand person. And so it's like, here, try this. My goal is to help you make your life easy. And I've even seen in his records that he sends me, he's attempted to make the chronology. And it's like, that looks kind of like mine. And it's like copied and pasted. It just looks ugly. And he finally was like, forget it. He just sends me everything now because it's not worth it. So, it's interesting. I love the fact that you expanded on the life care planning, and like, it's not just one thing. It can be a piece of this or a piece of that, and you're still using that same skill set. And it's the same thing for any attorney in any medical legal case. Like, there are different avenues that you can be useful. It doesn't have to be one thing. So I appreciate you sharing that for me.
And part of it was kind of the retirement plan. I hear from so many people that and it's true in some states, but not all states, that you cannot really function as an expert if you didn't practice at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to retire. So what's going to be my backup plan? Well, that's not true. Obviously, writing life care plans. So I thought, well, if I can learn another skill that when I age out or whatever of doing expert work, that I would have something to be able to continue to do. And so that hasn't happened yet to me, like at all. And I have kind of curtailed all my expert work to be just cases regarding kids with trachs and vents, because I had to really narrow it down. I was just getting way overwhelmed with the number of cases, and I don't particularly, I just get really excited about trach and vent kids, just put it that way. So, doing an IV infiltrate is like, so, but what I love about the life care planning part is, I'm not at the bedside anymore. So I don't get to see kids and their families. But in life care planning, you do a home visit. And so you get to fly to wherever they live, go to their home, meet the family, meet the kid, and kind of help them figure out what kind of things that they need. And so for me, that's the best part of writing life care plans.
Yeah. I love that. And it makes complete sense on still tapping into something that you would miss or miss from being not being at the bedside. So that makes total sense. And the fact that you can continue to do really use your, we all use your skill sets in the behind the scenes work, but use your skill sets in that kind of more impactful way, even after you retire. So it makes sense. I love the fact that you've kind of lined up your life, like looking 3 steps ahead. You're my kind of girl.
I really just want to travel to Europe. I'm just going to be honest with you.
Love it. I love it.
Really my goal.
Yeah. Hey, there is nothing wrong with that goal. Nothing wrong with that goal. Okay, so now your life now as a legal nurse consultant, you're doing life care planning, you're doing MedMal, PI, expert work. Do you, I guess where I'm headed is, do you market yourself now? I know you're on LinkedIn because that's how we've connected. Do you do much marketing now? What does that look like for you? And the reason I say that is because that's everybody's always asking, how do I get clients? And that's really what I want to help people understand, those that have gone before and what because there's so many different avenues, right? So what does that look like for you? And in the same breath, like what kind of advice would you give those that want to know, how do I do this? How do I get my first client? How do I put myself out there? How do I do what you're doing?
Well, first, I think that you have to have patience and understand that, you just don't get a ton of cases overnight. And if you do, consider yourself very lucky. It takes a long time, but for me, it happened between networking at conferences and LinkedIn. And initially when I was on LinkedIn, I would post probably 2 or 3, maybe even 4 times a week. It was like in my planner, post LinkedIn today. And I would spend more time than I should have trying to create posts, like trying to think of things that were going on at work that I could post about, stuff like that. And then, and I would kind of keep track. If I got a case, I would ask, how did you hear about me? And what I was finding out was that it was more word of mouth. Like very few people, although I have one attorney who said straight up, I found you on LinkedIn and he sends me every piece case he gets. But, again, generous guy, that just happened to work out. But what I found out in October of last year, I was really getting burnt out posting on LinkedIn. And I decided I was going to take a 30-day walk away from LinkedIn, which I think a lot of people do, and I think it's healthy. A lot of people say, I just needed to step away. And so I stepped away, and it was kind of more than healthy. And I was still getting business, and then I kind of did one of those retrospective look at all of my cases, and and I always ask, how did you find me? And what I was finding is that it was either repeat attorneys, or attorneys telling other attorneys, got your name from another attorney, or it was people I knew on LinkedIn. Right.
Yeah.
So then around November, like I'd taken a month off, I thought, okay, now I'm going to go back to posting. And I think I posted once or twice, and I was just like, I just can't do this. But I love LinkedIn, and I'll post if I feel like I have something burning that I want to share or educate.
Yeah.
I love to interact with other people's posts.
Yep.
So I thought, you know what, just do what you love.
Yeah.
Right. And I
100%.
love to see everybody else's posts.
Yeah.
And then, I'd love to comment and say, congrats to you. Like, that's awesome, girl.
Yep.
That's what I love. I don't need to create falseness. I just,
So
I don't really post much on LinkedIn. I feel like I posted everything you possibly know about trachs and an airway, that people are like, okay, Marcia, we get it. And so really, most of my stuff is coming from word of mouth, I guess.
And I'll tell you, I love that you said that, because I totally agree. So I came from a social media background in a past life. I love posting on social media. When it came to legal nursing, it became a challenge because it was different than what I had originally posted. And really coming up with content. But I love social media. I love the aspect of meeting people online, and the social selling of it. It's again a little bit different when it comes to legal nursing. That's why I created this podcast, was because I didn't have anything to post, and so this was content to post. But what I want to say is that the value of you doing what you're doing, commenting, I see you stand out. You stood out to me because of the comments, the genuine, kind comments that you make on my posts, on other people's posts, makes you stand out. And I think is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than if you were posting on LinkedIn. Because you become memorable. The whole goal, like you said, the networking. If you can't be at events, right? How do I network in this environment? Because I agree with you 100% on the word of mouth, the networking. My track record on clients through LinkedIn is like a goose egg. I mean, maybe one. Who happened to be on my podcast, but I met on LinkedIn. But it is word of mouth. It is the people you get to know. It is the people that I've interviewed and connected with. So I think that the valuable comments on other people's posts, and if it's something that you really enjoy, is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than posting on LinkedIn. So I want to give credit where credit is due, because it's almost like, well, I'm supposed to be posting, but actually the smart thing is that you don't really need to be posting. You have to know, you have to have kind of your calling card out there, your business card out there, right? In your business card, you go to your LinkedIn profile, you know exactly what you do.
Right.
And what people are going to go to your profile if you comment on their post, and then you're going to be top of mind. And that's exactly what happens, is that it's word of mouth. Oh, I know so-and-so. I know that's how I try to refer people, is because I see them, they're top of mind. And that's an easy way to do it. And so I love the fact that you love that. And it took you pulling, but I'm kind of in that same boat right now where I'm not really I'm posting my podcast, but not really posting to post, because it doesn't, I don't feel called to it. There's not something, it feels forced. I don't want it ever to feel forced. So I love the fact that you gave yourself permission to take a break and then come back and reflect and go, no, this is what I love to do. So this is what I'm going to do. And moving forward, if I feel called to it, then I will do it. Because I also say the same thing about the OR. It's like, I don't know what else I can post about the OR. I'm an OR nurse, like, if you're looking for an OR nurse, that's me.
Yeah. And some people love to post, and when they do, I appreciate it because I feel like I learn a lot from people.
Sure.
But I guess people just need to do what you love.
Exactly.
Like, life is too short to try to be somebody you're not.
On the opposite side, someone would say, well, I don't like to comment, but I love to post. And those people, you can tell their posts are brilliant. And I love to read those posts because they're so good. So it can go both ways. There's so many ways to go back to skin a cat.
Yeah. I was in a deposition once where, and it was only once, and I've been deposed, quite a few times, that she made a comment about something that it was a female
that you had posted.
That I had posted.
Sure.
And, that's the kind of stuff that just makes you angry, know? And, and that was like, probably, I don't know, 3-4 months before that October when I had decided, you know what, I'm just
going to take a break. Yeah. No, that's fair. That's smart and fair. You do, because you do have to be, if you're doing expert work, you have to be a little bit, you have to be mindful about what you share. And my podcast was brought up once. And it, it was like, I'm having conversations with people that are in the business and it's like, I'm not going to share, things that, and I'm not going to have my guests share things that would compromise their work. So it's just a simple conversation, but it is brought up and you have to be mindful of that. And if you don't feel comfortable posting for that reason, then comment on everybody's posts and be and be genuine and kind. It stands out because there are, especially on LinkedIn, there's very little social connection on there. So to be the one that's social is going to stand out. It's different than other platforms. It stands out on LinkedIn if you're, if you genuinely are interested in someone's content, it stands out to the people reading the comments and the person that posted. So it's, but yeah, I agree. It's like, do what's comfortable for you and feels good. And if it's not LinkedIn, then it's not LinkedIn. Do something else, Yeah. So I'm glad we had this conversation. But you do make such genuine comments, and that's how you stood out to me, is that you are very kind on there and you genuinely are interested in what people have to say. And I think it's a nice thing, especially nowadays, So
sometimes you comment though, and then you read back what you say and you go, oh, I hope you read that the right way.
I know. There is that layer of it, but just the fact that you took the time to do it, stands out. Okay. We could talk about this all day, but we're not going to. So I appreciate you sharing your story and really giving an insight on who you are and how what your journey is like. And I'm sure that you will have an influx of people in your inbox saying how much they love this conversation, because that's what happens. So can you share with us where we can find you and how we can connect with you?
So to connect with me, probably the easiest is through LinkedIn. And I think I'm just Marsha Blount, APRN.
Yeah.
I don't look at myself. And it's BLOUNT. And then my email is my last name, Blount, BLOUNT, APRN at AOL.
Perfect. Okay.
And that's it. No website.
Yeah.
No nada.
Yeah, I love it. Simple. Keep it simple. And that will be linked in the show notes so people can click on that. Not a problem. Find you as well. So I appreciate you spending your time with me outside of Cincinnati.
It was great to meet you. It's so fun because, that is the one thing that you meet so many people, and we talk about this periodically on LinkedIn, that you just feel like you've known them, for years.
For sure.
And that's the fun part about getting together at conferences is that
exactly.
you finally get to meet face to face,
Exactly. This is my version of that. I don't go to many conferences, but this is my version of the one-on-one hallway time. So I appreciate you spending that with me. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in this fun conversation on the Limitless Legal Nurse Consulting Podcast. I hope you found this episode as inspiring and empowering as I always do. And I hope that you share this episode with your friends. If you enjoyed it, I would love it if you could leave us a review or comment, as I would love to share them in the future episodes. Or hop on over into my DMs and send me a quick message. I can be found on Instagram at anna.b.gray, on my website at limitlesslnc.com, and over on LinkedIn at anna.gray. And I want you to remember, you are limitless. Until next time.